So, my grandmother used to tell us this super scary story, which honestly, I don't even know if she wanted to frighten us to death, but it sure worked. She had grown up as a young child in some remote village in Indonesia, moving to the States in her later teens. There was a legend in her village that naughty children who disobeyed their parents would be taken away by a winged creature in the middle of the night. I don't know about you, but if I thought staying on Santa's good list wasn't reason enough to not misbehave, then the fear of being plucked out of your bed as you slept would sure do it. Apparently, according to my grandmother, she once saw the creature soaring past her window in the middle of the night. She has been quite poorly and unable to sleep, so her mother had her moved her bed over closer to the window so she could have some fresh air and enjoy looking up at the moon and the stars at night. Being a fairly small and poor village, there had been a bit of a scandal when one of the farmers allegedly told that somebody was stealing his fruit. Nobody truly admitted to the crime, and it seemed they had a thief in their midst. That same night, as grandmother was looking out the window, she saw the child stealer, as they had named the creature. It was around the size of an adult human, but its skin was a bright color and completely hairless. It had 2 huge black wings and a face that was reminiscent of a rodent with 2 huge pointy ears. It gave the appearance of a half-human, half-bat-like creature. She said it made this horrendous high-pitched scream and entered the open window of the home opposite. Too frightened to see what happened next, she tells me she huddled down under her own covers, having closed her window quietly. Although she knew that she hadn't been naughty, there was no way that she wanted to be spotted by this thing. And of course, the next morning, there was utter panic in the village, as the small boy from the house opposite of her had been taken, vanished with just a pile of stolen, rotting fruit under his bed. It scared her enough to go through her entire life as a law-abiding citizen, and she installed the same sense of moral code onto my own mother, and then onto us. This story alone was enough to keep my siblings and I out of trouble as kids, even though we were in the U.S. There was no way in hell we were risking the wrath of the child stealer. It might be an old Indonesian tale, but it's something that has stuck with me, even now as an adult. Currently, I am a nighttime security guard at a mall. For the most part, it's a pretty easy job. We don't tend to get a lot of trouble, and to be honest with you, it's mostly just a matter of patrolling through the building, making sure no would-be shoplifters have hidden themselves away, and to be on site when late or very early deliveries come in. Piece of cake. It's fairly new, so there's no creepy stories that can go along with it, unfortunately. However, we do have some high-end stores, but nothing worth holding up, and all the money gets banked every night. We've never had any major raids or robberies, which is why when the alarm system started going nuts one night, over by the sporting goods area, I wasn't too concerned. Sometimes, not often, but it does happen, a raccoon or some other small animal gets into the delivery bay and sets off the motion sensors. That's about the scariest thing I'd come across so far, as that thing was pretty big. However, it just ran out, and I opened the back up, having found no trash to rifle through. So I was expecting the same kind of deal this time. Headed over, coffee in hand, and how worried I was. I turned off the alarms and entered into the store. At first, when I heard the fluttering, I thought crap. A bird might be harder to scare off initially than a raccoon who just ran out. A bird will usually be a lot more scared and start making a mess of things. Once I got into the back, where all the deliveries are sorted, the flopping got louder. and then I heard a sound that almost made me drop my coffee. It was this terrible, unhuman, ungodly shrieking noise. Again, I wasn't quite frightened, yes. I was startled, as I was expecting a bird noise, not that. But at this point, I wasn't what I would call scared. At least not yet. I hit the lights, still fully expected to be face to face with, I don't know, maybe a large owl or a pigeon. What I instead saw actually did make me drop my coffee and break my mug, reaching for my gun out of reflex. This thing was no bird. It was actually around the size of a large child, maybe a 10 to 12-year-old child to be exact. Completely black. If it hadn't been flapping about, I would have sworn it was a very small would-be robber. The body was very human, except its flesh was jet black, and had very human-like arms and legs. But the head and the wings, yes, this thing had wings. It was very reminiscent of a bat. It had tiny yellow beady eyes, very pointy ears, think like an elf, except longer, very exaggerated and pointed, and very sharp-looking teeth, like little knives. Honest to God, it was some sort of bat-human creature. It made this awful screaming noise, and at that point, in my fight or flight, I had two options. The first would be to shoot it. The second, open the delivery door back up. And you know what? I'm not a murderer, even if this thing was some kind of monster. You see, it wasn't trying to attack me. The scream seemed more like it was panicked, probably because it was trapped, and it was right over by the door. So I released it, and the door opened up, and it flew straight out. After all that, it truly scared the hell out of me. I have no idea what the hell that was, what kind of animal it was, or what it was doing, or how it got in there. But I can confidently say, I never felt like it wanted to attack me or try and hurt me, even though it looked pretty vicious and evil, and like it could have torn me in pieces. I just think it was maybe scared. I don't know. It still boggles my mind to this day. One thing I never did was actually get to see the security footage of it. I'm sure it's lying around somewhere. I like to take a run in the morning before heading off to work, since I am currently a teacher. This means getting up super early, and often when it is still pretty dark. Luckily, most of the tracks and streets around here are fairly well lit, even through the parkland, so it's not often I find myself running in total darkness. One winter morning, however, I desperately needed to get a stretch in before a long day ahead of teaching and Christmas pageant rehearsals. So, I was up even earlier than usual, and it was pretty dark out, despite the streetlights. I see all sorts of wildlife on my runs, and have been scared to death many a time by something running across my path. But I am in their domain, when it is still officially nighttime, so I only have myself to blame, I guess. There are no predators here, though. I am not foolish enough to go running alongside bears or even mountain lions. To be honest, the biggest thing I have ever run across is a possum. They can be sneaky little guys, but again, never bothered me. More like, hey, get out of here. But on this day, something felt weird from that moment I got onto the path. So you know, there's about half a mile through the trees, which isn't really lit until you get back onto the track. This is due to the tall timber. It kind of blocks in a lot of light, especially the angle in which the sun rises. I have ran it so many times I'm confident anyway, but I always have the light on my phone too. On this morning, it was as if I could just tell as soon as I hit the trees that something was going to happen. But I would never have expected to be what actually happened. I could hear commotion overhead, up in the top of the trees that I ran past. Now, there were often birds about to start their day, and squirrels even angry with me, quote-unquote, waking them up. It made me not so concerned. But whatever was going on did seem to be reaching some sort of crescendo. There was a ton of racket. And then, almost like something out of a cartoon, there was a whooshing noise, and in front of me stood what I can only describe to you as a Batman. Literally. I mean, obviously it wasn't Batman. And for just a split second, bearing in mind that he was only illuminated by my cell phone light, I thought it was some loon dressed up as Batman, thinking it was a little early for Halloween. That freaked me out, as I thought maybe I was about to be robbed, when instead of asking me for my wallet, it made this weird high-pitched screaming, spreading its wings. I distinctly remember this. If this is a dude in a costume, he must know somebody in Hollywood, because that thing is super realistic looking. Black and scaly, yellow eyes, sharp little teeth. My mind began to try and compute that this thing in front of me couldn't possibly be a person in cosplay. The body was a weird dark red color, and it was not quite as tall as me. It had human-like arms and legs, but now looking at the face more and more, it was part man and part bat. It couldn't have been a mask. It was too realistic. It made that awful screeching hiss again, and began to flap its wings. It shot up so fast that I didn't even see the direction that it went off in. I hadn't even really looked closely at its feet when I shone the phone light down to where it had been. There were claw marks. It appeared to have some sort of talons. It looked strong enough to pick up a small dog possibly, and carry it away. I ran home, possibly racing as fast as I could. Later on, I found myself running on alternate routes, and never went back on the same route. Now, and ever since then, I only run once the sun has risen. It's an encounter that will stay with me for a long time. Unfortunately, there's only few people I can tell, because, well, due to the nature of the story, who's going to believe me? Thank you for listening. Hi, just wanted to chime in and say I'm a huge fan of the show, and I wanted to send to you a report of my own. I was driving home one night, late after work. A little FYI on me. I work in a hotel, what they call the evening shift or second shift, which means I finish up right about 2 a.m., or as soon as my coworker gets there, which sometimes isn't until 2:15. Since the roads are usually packed in the daytime, it is a quite built-up area, but at 2 a.m., I finally have the place to myself. It's a fairly short commute, so I was really only around 10 minutes from home and bed, when something caught my eye out of the window. Just because I'm the only car on the road at the time, doesn't mean I drive recklessly. You gotta go careful at night, especially considering I've had deer jump out in front of my car. So, when I saw something fly into the trash cans, something that looked huge, I made an effort to slow down, drive past and get a look. I will never forget what stepped out. It was around the size of a small teenager, maybe a large child, a middle schooler maybe. Covered in thick black fur, it appeared, and large claws and talons. It was the weirdest looking thing I'd ever seen. It appeared to have a snout, and reddish amber glowing eyes. I didn't see any teeth, but it had behind it the shape that appeared to be these massive wings. They looked exactly like a bat's, except more tattered. It was like I was looking at a gorilla with the head of a dog almost, and bat-like wings. It's not a super accurate description, but it's the best one I can muster up. What I can't accurately tell you is this thing was incredibly ugly. I don't know what kind of animal it was, but it almost reminded me of a creature you'd see off the movie Army of Darkness. If you've never seen that movie, well, I strongly suggest you watch The Evil Dead, because they are good films. Anyway, I craned on and sort of went, and it disappeared. Anyway, I wanted to know if you've ever received reports of anything similar. Again, I've never seen something like that in my life, and although I do enjoy good horror stories, I had no intention to actually live in one, so you can imagine how scared out of my life I am